Let's move to South Africa now. One of the key highlights from South Africa's Finance Minister Tito Mboweni's midterm budget speech yesterday is a declaration of a proposal of a 3-year wage freeze in an effort to stabilize the spiraling public sector wage bill and support fiscal consolidation. Basically reduce debt. About 36.5 billion rand has been reduced from the compensation, or proposed to be reduced from the compensation of employees, mainly from a freeze in salary increases. In addition, the government is coordinating work relating to developing a comprehensive public sector remuneration strategy for the medium to long term. This is going to include public office bearers, state-owned companies, public utilities, and local governments. Let's listen to some of what Tito Mboweni said.
Let me say that the president, by putting an economic reconstruction and recovery plan, has ensured that we accelerate the growth potential of the economy. This will secure fiscal sustainability and build this economy better than before. There are priority structural reforms that require acceleration. As we have mentioned before, we have started Operation Vumile as a critical coordination tool to unlock and fast-track implementation of the structural economic reform agenda. And the Deputy Minister, Masondo, is leading this initiative, and a technical team headed by Dr. Sean Phillips will draw on expertise and capacity from the private sector and the public sector as well. This will ensure that implementation is well coordinated, sequenced, and timers. In the light of the launching of the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Program, the presidency will very much be involved with us in this process so that the presidency can help us drive the program, because they're at the center of government.
All right, so Global Business Report on Arise News just heard from Tito Mboweni in his budget speech to the nation of South Africa. Joining me now to discuss this is, of course, the CEO of Hesed Consulting, Vumile Msweli. You're welcome, Vumile. So based on the speech now, with rising unemployment in South Africa, the nation is in recession, so many issues that they're facing. Were there any promising takeaways from Tito Mboweni's midterm speech that you could take out from there?
Good afternoon. Yes, I think definitely so. I think the 12.6 billion that is going to be allocated towards employment initiatives, which have been championed by our President Cyril Ramaphosa, things like the Youth Employment Services Agency is going to be critical. I think a lot of young South Africans are looking forward to that. But that being said, we've also seen a little bit of good news. We've seen that our unemployment rate has actually dropped to 23.3%, which is a 7% decrease from what we initially saw in the beginning of the year when COVID started hitting us in that first quarter, which was at 30.1%. So we're looking forward to seeing how that 12.6 billion is actually going to be spent and how it's going to be impacting the youth of South Africa.
So how sustainable is the economic outlook? And you sound pretty positive there, but how sustainable is the economic outlook and recovery plan that Mr. Mboweni shared from a human capital perspective as a driver of growth?
It's not as sustainable as I'd like it to be. In essence, we've seen in the past month, since COVID began, 22 million South Africans have received cash grants, which means in essence, our tax base is decreasing. So he's looking to increase our current tax base of 5 billion rands to 10 billion for the year 2023. So where's that money going to come from? Obviously, he's looking to corporate South Africa, but a large portion of that is a pay-as-you-earn, which are South African taxes with a smaller base. Where's that money going to be generating from? That's a massive concern to me. And I know he's very, very focused on saying our recovery is going to be focused on building infrastructure, expanding electricity generation, which has been a challenge in South Africa with load shedding being reinstated. He's looking at what's going to happen with our digital spectrum. And if you're looking even with our telcos currently, our prices have also decreased. So that's also narrowing the margins that they have access to. So we look at rapid industrialization, employment, but my question is, in order to fund that, he's looking at reducing debt, but our tax base is also going to be reducing, but more tax. So where are those funds going to be coming from?
So would the logical thing be to increase taxes? Because you've got a smaller base, you want to increase your base, so you've got more people that can contribute towards the tax pool. But if the base is that small, I mean, so one, is he looking at increasing taxes? Is that a logical move? Two, what room is there? I mean, do you want to pay higher taxes in order to assist the government fund its initiatives?
I definitely, like any law-abiding citizen, will pay my taxes, but it's not my first preference to increase my taxes. So my understanding, and I think most likely where he's going to be looking at, is having to drive small business growth in order to get another tax base, which is counterintuitive, right? Because currently a lot of our small businesses who earn under 1.2 million basis, I believe, don't have to pay taxes. So is that going to change whilst we're trying to start up the economy? Is he going to increase it, which I don't think is going to be feasible in a smaller base, to increase it by such a large margin? And of course, we're still waiting to hear from the World Bank if they are going to be giving us that loan, which was, of course, not even COVID related, just to help us, tie our pennies there. So I'm really, really interested to see what his plan is in generating that revenue.
All right. Yeah, we also here in Nigeria, we're also waiting for a loan from the World Bank to the tune of about $1.5 billion. Haven't heard anything from them since, though. I want to ask you again about employment. What are some of the employment realities that exist in South Africa currently? What does this signal for economic prosperity? You were just talking about the unemployment rate dipping to 23%. So what about the realities on the ground there?
So the reality is that if you're working currently for government, you've enjoyed a 7.2% per annum average increase for the past 5 years, which is substantially higher than our inflation rate. He's saying he's going to stop that. He's talking about freezing the rates. So us now looking at working into government, which is a large contributor for employment in South Africa, that's going to have an impact. Currently in South Africa, a lot of companies have obviously downsized. A lot of organizations have actually in the private sector requested employees to take pay cuts in order to stay afloat. So those guys obviously don't have a lot of money to keep moving around. If employees already taking, on average, we're looking at about 30 to about 15% pay cuts. At executive levels with some of our major mining companies, we've actually seen up to 50% pay cuts. So those are the realities. Finding a job now in South Africa is going to be more difficult than ever before. With everything also going online, we're starting to see a rise in outsourcing of labor to other parts in the world. Labor is a little bit more affordable. We all know in South Africa that our labor unions are very, very robust. So them conceding to this 3-year wage freeze is going to be interesting. And then what happens post that? Because it's not a case of just retaining labor in South Africa. It's now remaining competitive with the rest of the world.
Thank you. So you actually preempted my next question, and hopefully you can expand on that. The proposed 3-year wage freeze, you talked about robust unions, kind way of saying that they're very powerful. So, how do you see that wage freeze proposed, going over with them and the rest of South Africa? And how could this impact fiscal sustainability and the expenditure ceiling for the nation?
I think getting the buy-in for our labor unions is going to be critical. We've seen a number of major organizations actually come to a standstill with regards to strikes in negotiating wages. This has been a culture in South Africa that is a very robust economy, and we take our labor quite seriously. But I think it's definitely going to have to be a collaborative approach, because it's not just labor unions in the private sector, but even within the government, the likes of SADA, our teachers' unions. We've seen our doctors historically also take to the streets. So all of this is going to have to be a collaborative approach. However, we don't know how that's going to be. If they've actually conceded to it completely, or they're still in negotiations. We are under the impression that currently they'll be meeting within the next 3 weeks to say everyone will be collaborating. Without that, unfortunately, we could see a massive collapse or massive regression in our fiscal outlook.
Thank you for that. Only got less than a minute. What kind of environment is South Africa creating for the future of entrepreneurship, and any merit in a minute if you can? With regards to entrepreneurship, I think we have to reduce our barriers to entry. That's a massive challenge that we've had in the country. I know that right now with FDI, we're looking at getting people from outside to actually start investing within South Africa. It's going to be a challenge because obviously our level of trust and confidence is the lowest it's been since World War II. So we have got our work cut out for us, but I'm a big believer in the country of South Africa. It is my country, and I believe that we are going to get through this. All right, lots of optimism. We'll have to have you back to see how these things work out, because lots of hard work ahead for Tito Mboweni and the government of South Africa. CEO of the Hesed Consulting, Vumile Msweli, thank you so much for speaking to us and giving us your insights on the South African economy.